The acid reached my second layer of skin on day 73. I know because I counted. Every hour, every minute during the hours when I could still think clearly enough to count. When the pain became a metronome instead of a scream, I marked time by the rhythm of dissolution, the steady, patient work of alien digestive enzymes, reducing Sergeant Mikhail Kane, 30 to 4 years old, son of a manufactory overseer from Hive Tertius, into component proteins the Hive fleet could repurpose. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I got here. Floating in darkness, trapped inside ceramite armor that has become both my salvation and my tomb, while organic acids eat me alive, one microscopic layer at a time. Let me tell you about the 11 weeks I spent conscious, aware, and screaming into a Vox channel that my brothers could hear but could do nothing to answer except listen as I dissolved. Let me tell you how the Imperium's promises of protection proved to be lies, and how I learned that prayers echo in empty chambers when you need them most. My name was Mikhail Kane. This is how I died without dying. The briefing chamber aboard the Righteous Vengeance smelled of recycled air, machine oil, and the particular staleness that accumulates in spacecraft that haven't seen port in 7 months. 38 of us stood in formation. Sergeant rankings, all of us, pulled from various companies for what Captain Theron called special operational insertion. I remember thinking the phrase sounded like propaganda masking something terrible. I was right. The Xenos bioship has been crippled but not killed, Theron said, his voice flat with exhaustion. The captain was 57, face carved into permanent lines by 3 decades of service. He'd seen orcs, Tau, and traitor legions. This was his first Tyranid engagement. You could see it in how his hands trembled slightly when he activated the holothitic display. Our bombardment destroyed propulsion and several major chambers, but the organism continues to function. It's adrift, broadcasting distress pheromones. If another Hive Fleet element responds before we can scuttle it completely, this entire sector is lost. The hologram showed something that looked like a warped cathedral made of chitin and exposed organs. A bioship 3 kilometers long, bleeding atmosphere from dozens of breaches, but undeniably, horribly alive. Portions of its carapace still pulsed. I could see movement in the intact sections. Our mission is simple, Theron continued. The word simple in a military briefing always precedes descriptions of elaborate ways to die. Boarding teams will insert through damaged sections, navigate to the primary neural clusters, and place melter charges directly into the ship's central ganglia. Detonation will trigger cascade failure throughout the organism. Beside me, Corporal Venn, 22 years old, recruited from an agri-world, still young enough to believe in glory, whispered, "The Emperor protects." I didn't correct him. He'd been taught those words since childhood, conditioned to repeat them like a prayer that might mean something. I'd learned years ago that the phrase was propaganda designed to keep soldiers compliant. The Emperor, if he had ever possessed awareness, was a corpse on a throne consuming 10,000 souls daily to maintain a navigation beacon. He protected nothing. The Imperium ground its citizens into components just like the Tyranids did, only with more hypocrisy about purpose and glory. But I kept my mouth shut. Venn would learn if he survived long enough. Insertion in 4 hours, Theron said. Check your seals. The internal atmosphere of that ship is toxic to human life. Digestive enzymes, spore concentrations, acidic gas mixtures. Your armor is rated for 72 hours of exposure. We'll extract you in 48. Questions. No one asked questions. We'd all learned that asking questions in the Imperial Guard earned you extra duty or suspicion of doubt. Doubt was heresy. Heresy was execution. The briefing dismissed. 38 of us filed out toward the armory. I remember thinking I'd see the sky again. My father had taken me to the hive roof once when I was 7, the only time I'd seen actual sky instead of rockcrete ceiling 10 kilometers overhead. The stars had been beautiful. I'd wanted to see them again before I died. I never would. The boarding torpedo smelled like promethium fuel and human fear. 18 of us packed into a cylinder barely wide enough for our armor, mag-locked to acceleration couches as the pilot counted down the launch sequence. The air tasted metallic, recycled oxygen mixed with lubricant vapor and the sharp tang of adrenaline sweat that even armor recyclers couldn't completely filter. 30 seconds, the pilot's voice crackled through the Vox. Brace for impact. I'd done boarding actions before. 7 times. You never get used to the moment of impact. The screaming of metal as the torpedo's drill prow punches through hull plating. The deceleration that compresses your organs against your spine. The sudden silence when the engines cut and you realize you're inside an enemy vessel that wants to kill you. This time was different. The impact came hard, harder than standard hull plating should have produced. The torpedo shuddered, and I heard a sound I'd never encountered in previous boardings. A wet, organic groan, like metal piercing flesh. The temperature sensors in my helmet flickered upward. 32 degrees, 37, 41. Atmospheric composition hostile, my armor's machine spirit. No, the automated analysis system. I corrected myself. Just programming, not an actual spirit, announced in flat binary code. Acidic compounds detected. Seal integrity critical. The boarding ramp dropped. What poured in wasn't air. It was thick, yellowish vapor that moved like liquid smoke, rolling across the torpedo's deck in waves. Where it touched exposed metal, I heard sizzling. The ramp itself began to pit and corrode within seconds. The smell, even through my armor's filters, I caught traces of it, was indescribably foul. Imagine rotting meat mixed with industrial solvents, undercut with something sweet and organic like overripe fruit, all of it concentrated to the point of physical presence. "Move! Move!" Sergeant Halleck bellowed from the front position. He was first out, flamer in hand, weapon already roaring as he cleared the landing zone. I was fourth in the line. By the time I stepped onto the ramp, I could see what we'd boarded. The interior of the Tyranid bioship looked nothing like a spacecraft. No corridors, no decking, no recognizable architecture. Instead, we stood in what appeared to be the interior of a vast organic cavity. Walls made of ridged chitin that glistened with moisture. Floor that wasn't floor, but a membrane stretched over something that pulsed underneath. Everything was alive. Everything was watching. The walls had eyes, not metaphorical eyes. Actual clusters of optical organs embedded in the chitin. Dozens of them, each the size of my fist, rotating independently to track our movement. They didn't blink. They just stared with the absolute focus of a predator watching prey enter its throat. "Formation Theta 7, Halleck ordered. "Objective is 300 meters, bearing 035. Weapons free. Anything that moves dies." We moved into the ship's interior. The membrane floor was wrong beneath my boots. Too soft, too yielding, like walking on something that was breathing. Each step produced a slight depression that slowly reinflated after we passed. My armor's weight sensors showed normal gravity, but my inner ear kept insisting I was walking on something alive that might decide to digest us at any moment. Turned out my inner ear was correct. The Tyranid workers hit us from above. They'd been clinging to the ceiling. A dozen of them, each one a nightmare of exposed muscle and blade-tipped limbs, waiting with the patience of spiders for prey to wander underneath. When they dropped in perfect coordination, 4 of them landing directly on Sergeant Halleck. He died instantly. The lead organism punched through his backplate with a chitinous spike that emerged from his chest in a spray of blood and armor fragments. He had time to make a sound, not a scream, just a wet gurgle, before the other 3 began tearing him apart. The corridor, if you could call it that, this organic tunnel that might have been an artery or digestive tract, erupted into chaos. Last fire lit the chamber in strobing flashes. The Tyranids moved like nothing human, flowing around our shots with a grace that shouldn't be possible for creatures that massive. When we hit them, they died badly, carapaces splitting to release floods of ichor. limbs severed continuing to twitch and grasp, mouths screaming in frequencies that made my teeth ache even through my helmet's audio dampeners. "Fall back to insertion point," someone shouted. I think it was Ven. Hard to tell. The Vox channel was chaos, overlapping voices, screams, static bursts as armor systems failed. I fired my last rifle on full automatic, burning through the power cell in 15 seconds. The last bolts carved through chitin, and for a moment I thought we might survive this. Then the floor opened, not metaphorically. The membrane we'd been walking on split down the center like a mouth opening, and I felt the surface beneath my boots vanish into a vertical shaft that dropped into darkness below. I fell. Time stretched. I remember seeing Ven above me, his hand outstretched as if he could somehow catch me. I remember the walls of the shaft rushing past, ribbed, pulsing walls that contracted in peristaltic waves like a throat swallowing. I remember thinking clearly and calmly, this is a digestive tract. I've fallen into the bioship's stomach. Then I hit liquid. The impact drove the air from my lungs. For a moment, I was submerged completely, drowning in something thick and hot that burned even through my armor's environmental seals. My helmet display went haywire. Temperature warnings, chemical alerts, seal integrity compromises flashing across my vision in urgent red text. I surfaced, gasping. The liquid was chest deep, viscous like oil but thinner, moving in sluggish currents. The chamber I'd fallen into was perhaps 20 meters across, oval-shaped, the walls lined with structures that looked like ridged teeth or filter systems. Bioluminescent patches on the ceiling provided dim, sickly yellow light. I was in a pool, a digestion pool. My armor's analysis system, functioning despite the chaos, provided data I didn't want to know. Liquid composition, organic acids, HENTITE digestive secretions. Current seal integrity, 94% estimated time to seal failure, 71 hours. I tried to climb out. The walls of the chamber were too smooth, too slick with acidic residue. My gauntlets scrabbled for purchase and found none. I activated my mag boots, but there was nothing ferrous to grip. Only organic compounds that my boots' magnetic fields couldn't affect. "Kane to any unit," I transmitted, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. I've fallen into a lower chamber, requesting immediate extraction. Coordinates transmitting now. Static. Kane to boarding team. Respond. More static, then finally a voice broke through. Theron, distant and breaking up. Copy position compromised, falling back to the transmission cut off in a burst of interference. I was alone. The first hour, I tried everything. I attempted to climb 17 times. Each attempt ended with my gauntlets sliding down the slick walls. My armor's servos, not machine spirits, just mechanical assistance systems, straining and failing to find purchase. I used my last rifle to cut handholds. The last bolts scorched the wall material, but it regenerated faster than I could burn through it. I watched in real time as the charred flesh regrew, new tissue bubbling up from underneath to seal the damage within seconds. I tried to swim to different sections of the chamber, hoping to find an exit. There was none. The chamber was sealed except for the vertical shaft I'd fallen through, 20 meters above, and the walls beneath the liquid surface sloped inward toward what I desperately hoped wasn't a drainage sphincter at the bottom. After 3 hours, I stopped trying to escape. After 6 hours, I started to understand my situation. The pool wasn't actively hostile. It wasn't trying to dissolve me quickly. Instead, it was patient. The Tyranids had evolved this chamber for long-term biomass reclamation, a holding pool where large pieces of organic matter could be broken down slowly, thoroughly, every molecule extracted and repurposed. My armor was protecting me, yes, but it was also trapping me in a container that the pool would eventually breach. The seal integrity reading had dropped to 93%, 70 hours until failure, the system estimated, then 69, then 68. I floated in the darkness, kept buoyant by my armor's internal air reserves, and did the mathematics that would haunt me. If the seals failed in 3 days, and the acids were already working on the armor's exterior, how long would I remain conscious once my skin was exposed? How long would it take the enzymes to dissolve muscle tissue? How deep would they have to eat before they reached vital organs? I tried praying, "Emperor of mankind," I whispered into my helmet, my voice sounding small and hollow. "If you protect your servants, protect me now. Grant me strength. Grant me deliverance." Grant me. Nothing happened. The acid continued its work. The temperature inside my armor climbed slowly, 37 degrees, 38, 39, as the digestive enzymes generated heat through their chemical reactions. The pool bubbled gently, releasing gas that my senses identified as methane and hydrogen sulfide. "They told us you protect," I continued, because I'd been conditioned since childhood to pray when afraid, even though I'd stopped believing years ago. The preachers promised, the texts claimed, the commissars swore. If that's true, then save me, please. The prayer echoed in my helmet. No divine light appeared. No miraculous rescue materialized, just the gentle sloshing of acid against ceramite and the slow, patient work of alien biology doing what evolution had designed it to do. After 12 hours, I stopped praying. After 18 hours, my Vox system flickered to life. "Caney, Sergeant Caney, if you're receiving this, respond." It was Theron's voice, distant and crackling with interference, but unmistakably present. I nearly sobbed with relief. Cain responding. "Captain, I'm trapped in a lower chamber. A digestion pool. I need immediate extraction. My seals are failing." Then, "Copy your position, Sergeant. Understand you're in a hostile environment. What's your status?" I gave him the numbers: seal integrity, estimated time to failure, chemical composition of the liquid. I tried to sound professional, calm, like a good Imperial soldier reporting tactical data rather than a man drowning in acid begging for rescue. When I finished, Theron was quiet for a long time. Too long. "Captain," I prompted, "extraction timeline." "Sergeant?" Theron's voice carried something I'd never heard from him before. Not fear. Worse. Resignation. "We lost 14 men in the withdrawal. The bioship is restructuring its internal passages, closing off sections we breached, rerouting corridors. The path to your location is complicated." A word that meant impossible but required more syllables to soften the impact. "How long?" I asked. "We're assembling an extraction team. 48 hours, maybe less if we can map a safe route. 48 hours, my seals would fail in 67. I had time. Barely, if they hurried. "Understood, sir," I said. "I'll maintain position and wait for extraction." "Sergeant Cain," Theron paused. "Keep your Vox open. We'll maintain contact. You're not alone." I was absolutely alone, floating in alien digestive enzymes while my brothers retreated to safety. But I appreciated the lie. It was kinder than the truth. "Yes, sir," I said. Cain out. The Vox stayed active. I could hear background noise, distant voices, equipment being moved, the ambient sounds of the boarding team regrouping aboard the Righteous Vengeance. It was comforting, in the way that hearing your family moving around the house at night is comforting when you're a child afraid of the dark. I floated in the pool and waited for rescue. The acids continued their work. The seal failure began at hour 71, exactly 1 hour later than the armor's prediction system had estimated. I felt it before I saw it, a sensation like cold water dripping onto my left forearm, except the liquid wasn't cold. It was hot, burning hot. I looked down at my armor's diagnostic display and watched as the left gauntlet's integrity rating dropped from 11% to 8% to 5% in the span of 30 seconds. Then the acid touched my skin. The pain was extraordinary. I'd been shot before. I'd been stabbed. I'd been burned by plasma splashback during a firefight on a Forge world. None of those experiences prepared me for the sensation of digestive enzymes making contact with human tissue. It wasn't just burning. It was a chemical reaction. Proteins breaking down at the molecular level, nerves firing distress signals as fast as biology allowed. I screamed. The Vox channel, still open, transmitted my scream to the righteous vengeance. Later, they told me it lasted 47 seconds before I ran out of air and had to stop to breathe. Kaini. Sergeant, report. Theron's voice cut through the pain. What's happening? Seals failed, I gasped, struggling to control my voice. Left arm. The acid is. It's on my skin. Extraction team is moving, Theron said quickly. 2 hours. Can you hold? 2 hours. With acid eating my arm. With more seals certainly about to fail. Yes, sir. I lied. I can hold. The pain in my left arm evolved. The initial burning sharpened into something more specific, thousands of individual points of agony as nerve endings dissolved. I watched, unable to look away as the skin on my forearm began to blister underneath the failing armor seal. The blisters rose, popped, wept clear fluid that mixed with the acid. Underneath the destroyed epidermis, I could see the dermis, pink, raw, bleeding sluggishly. The acid kept eating. Within an hour, I could see exposed muscle tissue on my forearm. It looked nothing like the medical texts, not clean and organized, but ragged, partially dissolved, some sections already eaten down to white connective tissue. The pain had transcended description. It simply was an absolute reality that occupied every cubic centimeter of my consciousness. I tried to pray again. Not because I believed, but because the words were something to focus on besides the pain. Emperor of mankind, if you exist, if you're anything more than a corpse being worshipped by fools, if the preachers told any truth at all, please. The prayer dissolved into sobbing. The Vox transmitted that too. I could hear voices in the background aboard the ship, others listening, unable to help. Hour 73, my right leg seals failed. Hour 75, my chest plate integrity dropped below 15%. Hour 77, Theron's voice tight with something that might have been grief. Sergeant Kane. The extraction team encountered resistance. Tyranid organisms have sealed the route. We're finding another path, but how long? I interrupted. I needed a number, a goal, something to hold on to. 12 hours, maybe less. 12 hours, with acid eating through multiple seal failures now, with pain that had become my entire world. Understood, sir, I said. What else could I say? Please hurry. I'm dying. They knew. Everyone knew. By hour 80, I could no longer feel my left arm below the elbow. The nerves were gone, dissolved into component molecules. I should have been grateful. No nerves meant no pain, but instead I felt a worse horror. Part of me had ceased to exist. I was being erased, one layer at a time. I talked to fill the silence. The Vox remained open, and I narrated my dissolution because the alternative was screaming. The flesh on my left forearm is gone, I reported, my voice distant and clinical. I can see the radius and ulna. Arm bones. Someone listening probably knows the proper terms better than I do. They're yellowish white. There's still some tendon attached, but it's stringy, coming apart. The acid is working on the bones now. Silence from the Vox. Then a new voice, younger, uncertain. Sergeant Kane, this is Corporal Venn. We're coming for you. The Emperor protects. He'll... Don't say that. But the faith of the righteous is propaganda, I finished. Pretty lies they tell to keep us obedient. I prayed, Venn. For 3 days I've prayed. Nothing answered. No Emperor watches. No protection comes. There's just me and the acid, and the slow understanding that the Imperium's promises are hollow. I heard voices arguing in the background, someone cutting Venn's transmission. Theron returning, Sergeant, maintain discipline. Your words border on Heresy? Are you going to execute me for heresy while I dissolve alive in a Tyranid stomach? Theron said nothing. What could he say? I was already dead. We both knew it. By day 7, I'd lost sensation in both legs below the knee and my left arm up to the shoulder. The armor integrity readings had become almost comedic. 23% here, 15% there, single-digit percentages on my extremities. I was a patchwork of failing systems, held together by ceramite that was itself slowly succumbing to acids, evolved over millions of years to dissolve every form of organic matter the Tyranids encountered. I'd stopped screaming, stopped praying, stopped begging. Instead, I started making jokes. "Hey, Captain." I transmitted, my voice oddly cheerful through the vox. "Do you know what the difference is between a sergeant in a digestion pool and a ration brick?" Then Theron carefully. "What, Sergeant Kane? The ration brick provides more nutritional value. I'm mostly ceramite at this point. Very poor biomass return for the High Fleet." No one laughed. I laughed for them. A sound that bordered on hysteria, but somehow stayed just on the sane side of the line. The jokes became a ritual. Every few hours, I transmit something gallows humor, increasingly dark, increasingly inappropriate. The Vox channel stayed open, and I knew others were listening. My company, my brothers, unable to rescue me, unable to stop listening. Corporal Venn, I transmitted during hour 173. "Remember when you said the Emperor protects? I found out what he protects against. Boredom. This is extremely boring. Floating in acid for 7 days turns out to be monotonous. Who knew?" Venn's voice came back tight. "Sergeant, we haven't stopped trying to reach you. The bioship keeps regenerating passages. We cut through one section, it regrows behind us. We're still alive," I finished. "While I'm becoming soup. That's good, Venn. Someone should survive this disaster. Tell me something. Anything. What's the weather like aboard ship?" There was no weather on a spacecraft. But Venn understood what I was really asking. "Talk to me. Remind me that humanity still exists somewhere beyond this pool." He talked. He told me about the crew rotations, about a minor mechanical failure in the port engines, about rations being served cold because the galley systems were down for maintenance. Mundane details. Beautiful, ordinary, human details that had nothing to do with acid or dissolution, or the slow realization that I would never leave this chamber. During hour 190, my chest plate seal failed completely. The acid reached my torso. This time I did scream. I screamed until my throat was raw, until the vox distorted with the intensity of the sound. Until Theron ordered the channel temporarily closed because the crew aboard the Righteous Vengeance couldn't function while listening to my agony. When the channel reopened, I was laughing again. Mad laughter, broken laughter. That's a new experience, I gasped between hiccuping giggles. I can feel it eating my abdominal muscles. There's a sensation, like someone digging fingers into your stomach, except the fingers are made of fire and they're pulling everything apart, strand by strand. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating from a scientific perspective. Sergeant Kane. Theron's voice was strained. "The extraction team is lying," I interrupted. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" "Granted. There is no extraction team, or if there is, they're not coming. They can't. This bioship is still alive, still regenerating, and every hour you send men toward my position is another hour they might die trying to save a corpse. I'm already dead, sir. We all know it. I'm just taking an extremely long time to finish dying." Theron was silent. Then, "You're still alive, Sergeant. While you live, we don't abandon you." "I appreciate the sentiment," I said. "It's a nice lie. Better than the other lies, that the Emperor protects, that service brings honor, that dying for the Imperium means something. This lie at least is meant kindly." I stopped making jokes. By the 14th day, speech required too much effort. The acid had reached my lower chest. dissolving through muscle layers toward vital organs. My breathing was labored, each breath a conscious effort, controlled by diaphragm muscles that were slowly being eaten away. The pain had become normal. That was perhaps the most horrifying development. The human nervous system adapts to continuous stimuli, and mine had adapted to acid dissolution. I could feel it happening, tissue breaking down, bones becoming visible, organs being exposed to hostile chemicals, but it registered as background sensation, like static on a Vox channel. I floated in the pool, no longer struggling, no longer hoping, just existing in a state that wasn't quite life and wasn't yet death. The Vox stayed open. I didn't speak, but I listened. I heard their attempts, heard Theron ordering teams into the bioship's interior, heard them retreat when Tyranid organisms overwhelmed their positions, heard the casualty reports, 3 more dead, 5 wounded, 2 missing, all trying to reach me. Stop, I finally transmitted during hour 320. My voice was a whisper barely audible. Please, stop sending them. Let me die. Don't waste more lives. We don't abandon our brothers, Theron responded. Then you're fools, I said. The Imperium abandons millions every day. I'm no different. No more special than the billions dying in manufactorums or the trillions fed to the war machine. Let me go, sir. Please. He didn't respond, but the extraction attempts stopped. I floated in silence, accompanied only by the gentle bubbling of the digestive pool and the distant voices on the Vox channel. Men going about their duties, living their lives, existing in a world I'd never rejoin. The acid reached my second layer of skin on day 73. Wait, no, I said that already, didn't I? At the beginning, time is difficult now. The days blend together. I count them by marking off hours on my helmet's chronometer, but sometimes I forget what day I'm on. Day 21, day 25, does it matter? The muscle is what matters. My arms are gone now. Not entirely, the bones remain, yellow-white and pitted where the acid has begun etching the calcium. But the muscle tissue has dissolved completely, reduced to amino acids that the Tyranid bioship can absorb and repurpose. I watched it happen, watched the tissue separate into fibers, the fibers dissolve into proteins, the proteins break down into nothing. I can't move my arms anymore. The tendons are gone. Without tendons, bones are just structures, decorative, useless. My legs are in similar condition. The acid ate them down to mid-thigh before slowing, perhaps because the bone density is higher there, perhaps because the enzymes are designed to work slowly on large masses. I don't know. I'm not a magos biologist. I'm just a man learning more about anatomy than I ever wanted to know by watching himself be dissolved layer by layer. The strangest part is the consciousness. I'm still aware, still thinking. My brain is intact, protected inside a helmet that has somehow maintained integrity, while the rest of my armor failed. The life support systems continue to function, feeding me oxygen, filtering my blood, removing waste. The armor is keeping me alive, even as my body ceases to exist outside it. I've begun to wonder if this is what servitors experience. The Imperium takes criminals and heretics and lobotomizes them, reduces them to organic components for machinery, traps whatever remains of their consciousness inside metal frames programmed to serve. Is this my fate? To become aware machinery, trapped forever in ceramite that won't let me die? Captain Theron, I transmitted during hour 500. If you recover my armor, destroy it. Don't try to extract me. Don't attempt recovery. Just destroy it. Melt a charge, plasma, whatever you have. Please, Sergeant. That's an order, sir, I said. I know I don't outrank you. I know it doesn't work that way. But I'm asking man to man, not soldier to officer. Don't let me become a servitor. Don't let them trap whatever's left of me in this armor. Kill it. Kill me, properly. Theron took a long time to respond. Acknowledged, Sergeant Kine. You have my word. "Thank you," I said. Then I stopped transmitting for 3 days. I felt my liver fail on day 28. I know it was my liver because the armor's medical monitoring system, designed to track vital signs and administer combat stimulants, identified the organ failure with clinical precision. The readout appeared on my helmet display in sterile text: hepatic function seized, toxin filtration compromised. ADMINEMISTEINETAINESRENELTSTAI. The armor injected chemicals directly into what remained of my cardiovascular system. Drugs to handle the work my liver no longer could. The Imperium's technology keeping me alive even as my biology surrendered piece by piece. I should have felt something. Fear, relief, anything. Instead, I felt only a distant curiosity, the same detached interest I'd felt watching muscle tissue dissolve. My body was becoming a laboratory, and I was both subject and observer, documenting my own systematic deconstruction. The liver was just the beginning. Over the next 72 hours, I felt other organs begin to fail in sequence. My spleen, my stomach, portions of my intestinal tract. Each failure was announced by my armor's systems, each one compensated by automated medical intervention. The armor was doing the work of organs that no longer existed, maintaining homeostasis through chemical regulation and mechanical filtration. I'd become a hybrid, part human consciousness, part life support machinery, the boundary between flesh and ceramite blurring as one system failed and the other assumed its functions. "I'm becoming what the Mechanicus worships," I transmitted during hour 673. My voice was weak now, barely above a whisper. Speaking required diaphragm muscles I'd nearly lost. The merger of flesh and machine. Except there's no sacred communion here. Just slow replacement, biology failing, technology compensating. Nothing divine about it. Ven responded. He'd taken over primary Vox monitoring, staying on channel for hours at a time. I think Theron had ordered him to. Someone needed to listen, to bear witness, and Ven was young enough to still believe it mattered. "The Omnissiah teaches that the machine is sacred," Ven said carefully. "That the spirit within." "There is no spirit," I interrupted. "Just programming. Logic gates. Binary responses to sensor input. My armor isn't keeping me alive because it possesses consciousness or divine blessing. It's following manufacturing specifications written by tech adepts who never imagined this scenario. I'm alive because of engineering tolerances and redundant systems, not because any machine spirit cares whether I live or die." Silence. Then, "Sergeant, do you believe in anything anymore?" The question caught me off guard. Did I believe in anything? "I believe in the acid," I said finally. "I believe in dissolution. I believe that the Imperium lies to its soldiers about protection and purpose. I believe the Emperor is a corpse, the Mechanicus worships superstition, and the Ecclesiarchy trades in false hope. I believe I'm dying slowly because I was unlucky enough to fall into a Tyranid digestion pool, and no amount of prayer or faith or loyalty will change that. Is that the answer you wanted, Corporal?" "No, Sergeant," Ben said quietly. "But thank you for the honesty." I stopped trying to explain. Ven was still young enough to need belief in something. Emperor, Omnissiah, Imperial purpose, anything to make sense of the universe's cruelty. I wouldn't take that from him. He'd lose it eventually on his own, the way every soldier did if they survived long enough to see how the machinery of the Imperium actually functioned. I'd just lost mine faster than most. Accelerated disillusionment through concentrated exposure to suffering. The acid reached my chest cavity on day 35. I felt it as a pressure, liquid filling spaces that should contain lungs, heart, major vessels. My armor's life support had already assumed most respiratory function, but there was still a psychological shock in feeling foreign liquid where air should be. The sensation of drowning from the inside. My heart was still beating. I could feel it, rapid, irregular, struggling to pump blood through vessels that were partially dissolved. The armor's medical systems were working overtime now, maintaining blood pressure through chemical intervention, oxygenating blood through external filters, removing waste products through mechanical kidneys built into the armor's recycling systems. I was more machine than man. The realization arrived not as horror, but as simple fact. If someone could have examined me at that moment, they would have found a skull containing a functional brain, portions of a spine, a compromised cardiovascular system held together by automated medical intervention, and not much else. Everything else was gone or going, dissolved into component molecules, absorbed into the Tyranid bioship's biomass for repurposing. Sergeant Mikhail Kane, 34 years old, son of a manufactory overseer, had been reduced to roughly 12 kilograms of protected tissue, floating inside 300 kilograms of ceramide armor. I tried to move during hour 840, tried to flex fingers that no longer existed, tried to curl toes that had been dissolved weeks ago. Nothing responded. I was paralyzed, not through nerve damage, but through simple absence. You can't move limbs that aren't there anymore. The only part of my body I could still control was my face. Facial muscles were protected inside the helmet, still intact, still responsive. I could blink, could move my jaw, could speak, though speaking grew harder as my diaphragm dissolved and the armor had to mechanically force air through my vocal cords. I spent 6 hours making faces at nothing, smiling, frowning, grimacing, exercising the last voluntary muscles I possessed. It was absurd, childish, but it was also the only remaining proof that I still possessed agency, that some part of me could still act upon the world, even if that action was as meaningless as facial expressions no one would ever see. Corporal Venn, I transmitted during hour 860. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to remember it. Can you do that? Yes, Sergeant. The Imperium is a machine that consumes its own components, I said. It takes humans, people with names and families and dreams, and processes them into resources, soldiers, servitors, corpse starch. It doesn't matter what you become, only that you're efficiently converted. The Tyranids are honest about it. They're a biological machine designed to consume and repurpose biomass. The Imperium does the same thing but wraps it in propaganda about duty and honor, and the Emperor's protection. Sergeant, that's heresy, I finished. I know. But I'm past caring about heresy. I'm a consciousness trapped in a metal shell, watching my body get digested by aliens. And I've had 5 weeks to think about what the Imperium actually is. You want to know what I've concluded? We're no different from the Tyranids. We just lie to ourselves about it. Venn didn't respond. I heard him disconnect from the channel. He reconnected 4 hours later. Sergeant Kane, I don't agree with you, but I'll remember what you said. That's all I ask, I said. I started losing memories on day 42. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just small absences I'd noticed during the long hours floating in darkness. I'd try to remember my father's face and find the image slightly blurred. I'd think about my childhood home and realize I couldn't recall the color of the walls. At first, I thought it was psychological. Trauma response, dissociation, the mind protecting itself from unbearable circumstances by retreating from specificity. Then my armor's medical readout showed elevated intracranial pressure, and I understood. The acid was reaching my brain. My helmet had maintained integrity better than any other armor component, triple-sealed, reinforced, designed to protect the most critical system. But acid is patient. Acid finds microscopic flaws. Acid exploits molecular weaknesses, and after 6 weeks of constant exposure, the acid had found a way in. Not flooding in, not rapidly dissolving brain tissue, just trace amounts. Enough to cause inflammation, swelling, pressure against the inside of my skull. Enough to begin affecting function. I tried to remember my mother's name during hour 1015. I couldn't. The information was gone. Not buried, not suppressed, simply absent. like trying to recall a file that had been deleted from a data slate. I knew I'd had a mother. Everyone has a mother. But her identity had been erased from my accessible memory. Then I remembered I'd been taught to use family terms selectively. Father, brother, but mother. Had I been told not to think of her? The confusion spiraled. Was this memory loss, or had I always avoided that reference? The uncertainty was worse than the forgetting. I tried to remember my first day in the Imperial Guard. Gone. I tried to remember the name of the hive city I'd grown up in. Gone. I tried to remember what I'd wanted to be before the Imperium took me for conscription. Gone. My identity was dissolving along with my body. Corporal Ven, I transmitted, struggling to keep panic from my voice. I need you to do something for me. I need you to tell me who I am. My name, my rank, my unit, where I'm from. Tell me before I forget. Ven's response was immediate. You're Sergeant Michael Kane, 34 years old, born on Hive World Tertius. Served with the 117th Cadian Regiment for 11 years before transfer to specialist operations. Your father was an overseer at Manufacturum 773. You have two brothers, had two brothers. One died at Cronus, the other is stationed at... Stop, I said. The information was flooding back, memories reasserting themselves through external reinforcement. Thank you, I remember now. Like Ven was describing someone else's life. The connection between the information and my sense of self had weakened. I knew intellectually that I was Michael Kane, but I no longer felt like Michael Kane. I felt like something else, something unnamed, a consciousness trapped in metal, observing dissolution, documenting its own extinction. Over the next 72 hours, I made Ven repeat my identity 17 times. Each time the memories would return. Each time they felt more distant. By day 45, I stopped asking. It no longer mattered who I'd been, only what I was becoming. They gave up on extraction during day 49. Theron delivered the news himself, his voice carefully controlled. Sergeant Kane. Command has ordered cessation of rescue operations. The bioship has regenerated too extensively. Routes to your position are no longer viable. The risk to additional personnel cannot be justified. I laughed. The sound was bitter, mechanical, distorted by the vocoder as my voice became less human. Cannot be justified, I repeated. That's excellent phrasing, Captain. Very clinical. What it means is, I'm not worth more lives. Which is correct. I've been dead since day one. You're just making it official now. Don't offer me false comfort about the Emperor watching, or service being its own reward. We both know those are lies. The Imperium makes calculations, resource expenditure versus tactical gain. I've become a negative value. The mathematically correct decision is abandonment. Theron was silent for a long moment. Then, yes, that's the calculation. But for what it's worth, Kane, I'm sorry. I know, I said. So am I. After Theron disconnected, Ven stayed on the channel. He'd become my constant companion, the voice in darkness, the reminder that humanity existed beyond the pool. I'd never met him before the boarding action. I knew him now better than I'd known most of my family. Sergeant, Ven said quietly, Are you angry? I considered the question for a long time. Anger required energy, required caring, required believing that outcomes should be different than they were. I'd moved beyond anger into something colder. No, I said finally. I'm not angry. I'm just tired, Ven. Tired of pain. Tired of consciousness. Tired of being trapped in this armor, watching myself cease to exist layer by layer. Do you know what I want more than anything? What, Sergeant? To stop. To just stop. But my armor won't let me. It keeps repairing what it can, compensating for what it can't, maintaining consciousness even as my brain swells. The Emperor doesn't protect Ven, but Imperial manufacturing specifications are extremely thorough. This armor will keep me alive until there's nothing left to keep alive. How long? Ven asked. I checked my armor systems, reviewed the medical data, calculated based on current progression rates. Weeks, I said. Maybe months. The life support can maintain brain function almost indefinitely as long as the power cells hold. I have a long time left. Too long. Ven didn't respond. What could he say? We sat in silence, him aboard the ship, me in the pool, connected by Vox signal across the void, two humans contemplating the machine that kept one of them trapped in extended dying. Then, I said eventually, when this is over, when my signal finally stops, do something for me. Anything, Sergeant. Don't pray for me. Don't waste words on petitions to an emperor who isn't listening. Just remember that I was human once. Remember that I had a name. That's enough. I'll remember, Ven promised. Mikhail Kaney, 34 years old, Sergeant of the 117th. Human. Thank you, I said. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I cried. The tears were real. Biological response, emotional overflow, the last purely human function I still possessed. They ran down my face inside the helmet, and I couldn't wipe them away because I no longer had hands. The tears pooled against my cheeks, mixing with sweat and the condensation from my breathing. I cried for the man I'd been, for the life I'd never live, for everyone trapped in the Imperium's grinding machinery, for Ven, who'd have to carry my story, for the universe's absolute indifference to suffering. I cried until I had no tears left. Then I floated in silence, waiting for the next stage of dissolution to begin. My lungs collapsed on day 56. I felt them go, first the left, then the right, tissue too compromised by acid exposure to maintain structural integrity. The sensation was drowning magnified, chest seizing, desperate reflexive attempts to breathe, panic overriding conscious thought. Then the armor took over. Mechanical respirators activated, forcing oxygen directly into my bloodstream through chemical exchange rather than pulmonary function. The drowning sensation vanished, replaced by artificial calm as my brain received adequate oxygen despite my lungs being non-functional. I wasn't breathing anymore, not in any biological sense. The armor was doing the work, and I was along for the ride. A passenger in a machine that had once been my body. That's another one gone, I transmitted to Ven. My voice sounded strange, flat, emotionless, because speaking no longer required breath, and my vocal cords were being vibrated mechanically. Lungs are done. The armor is handling gas exchange now. How many organs can I lose before I stop being human, Corporal? Is there a threshold? I don't know, Sergeant, Ven said. Neither do I admitted. But I think I'm past it. I think I crossed that threshold weeks ago and just didn't notice. Because the transition was gradual. Like the old thought experiment, if you replace a ship one plank at a time, at what point does it stop being the original ship? Except in my case, the planks aren't being replaced. They're just being removed. I paused, organizing thoughts that were becoming increasingly difficult to maintain linear progression. The intracranial pressure was affecting cognition, not destroying it, but altering it, making concentration harder. I'm the ship of Theseus in reverse, I continued, deconstructed, disassembled. And the question is, how much can be removed before Mikhail Kaney stops existing and something else remains? You're still you, Ven said firmly. You're still thinking, still talking, still human. Am I? I asked. Or am I just programming running on biological substrate, consciousness as emergent phenomenon from neural activity, and when the neurons start failing, when the brain tissue begins to dissolve, what's left? Am I experiencing continuity of self, or am I a series of discontinuous moments that feel like continuity because each moment contains memories of the previous one? Sergeant, you're spiraling. Focus on what? I interrupted. There's nothing to focus on, Ven. No tasks to complete, no objectives to accomplish. Just time, vast stretches of time, and my own dissolution. And philosophical questions I never wanted to ask because I know there are no good answers. I heard Ven take a breath. When he spoke again, his voice was gentler. Then tell me something good. One good memory. Something from before. I searched my degrading neural architecture for something positive. Most memories had been eaten by acid-induced inflammation or lost to the general deterioration, but I found one, small, perfect, intact. I was 7, I said slowly. My father took me to the hive roof. It was his rest day, the only one he got per month, and he spent it bribing entrance guards to let us access the upper levels. We stood at the very top, the highest point in the hive, and looked up. I'd never seen the sky before, never seen stars. They were beautiful then, like someone had scattered diamonds across black cloth. What did your father say? Ven asked. He said, the Emperor made all of that, Mikhail. Every star is a piece of his domain. Never forget you're part of something vast. I paused. I believed him then. I thought the Emperor was real, that the stars belonged to humanity, that I was part of something grand and purposeful. And now I know the stars don't belong to anyone. The Emperor is a corpse, and I'm floating in acid learning that the universe is vast and cold and doesn't care whether we exist or not. But the memory is still good, Ven. That moment before I knew the truth, that was good. We sat in silence after that. I think Ven understood that some memories hurt more when they're beautiful, because they show you what you've lost. My heart stopped on day 63. I felt it happen, the rhythm I'd carried since before birth, the constant percussion that had accompanied every moment of my life, stuttering and failing. The muscle tissue, compromised by acid exposure and mechanical intervention, finally surrendered. The armor detected the failure instantly. Automated systems activated, electrical stimulation, chemical injection, mechanical compression. For 17 seconds, I was clinically dead. Then the armor restarted me. The sensation was extraordinary, like being yanked back from somewhere vast and dark, somewhere that might have been oblivion or might have been my imagination of oblivion. My consciousness returned with a jolt, and I found myself still in the pool, still trapped, still dying, but not yet dead. That was it, I transmitted, my mechanical voice shaking. Ven, that was death. I died. For 17 seconds I was gone, and the armor brought me back. Emperor be praised, Ven said reflexively. Don't, I snapped. Don't credit the Emperor. Credit the tech adepts who built redundant systems into military armor. Credit the engineers who anticipated cardiac failure in combat scenarios. Credit human ingenuity, but don't credit a corpse god who did nothing. My heart, or what remained of it, was beating again. Artificial rhythm, maintained by electrical pulses from my armor's medical systems. I wasn't alive in any natural sense. I was animated, maintained. A biological system kept functional by technological intervention. The Mechanicus would have been proud. The merger of flesh and machine, consciousness persisting beyond biological failure, the triumph of imperial engineering over death itself. Except it wasn't triumph, it was horror. I didn't want to be resurrected. I wanted to be released. I wanted those 17 seconds to have been permanent. A slide into darkness, consciousness ending, the torture finally over. Instead, I'd been forced back into the prison of failing biology and compensating machinery. Turn it off, I transmitted to Ven. The armor. There must be an override. Some way to deactivate the life support. Turn it off, please. I can't, Sergeant, Ven said. I don't have the authorization codes. Only a tech priest could. Then get one, I shouted, my voice distorting through the vocoder. Get someone who can shut down these systems and let me die properly. Then Theron's voice cutting through. Sergeant Kane. Request denied. Intentional termination of Imperial personnel is prohibited by regulation. Your armor will continue life support until natural cessation occurs. Natural cessation? I repeated. Look at me. Look at what I am. There's nothing natural left. I'm a brain in a box being kept alive by machines. This isn't life, Captain. It's torture with a medical degree. Nevertheless, Theron said, his voice hard, the regulation is clear. We will not be party to. Let them hide behind regulations and prohibitions, while I suffered for their moral comfort. The Imperium loved its rules, rules about duty, faith, loyalty, sacrifice. Rules that demanded I suffer because actively ending that suffering would be inconvenient for their consciences. I'd learned something in 63 days of dissolution. The Imperium's cruelty was systematic, not malicious, just bureaucratic. They'd torture you forever, not because they hated you, but because the regulations said torture was less problematic than mercy-killing. My heart beat on, mechanically maintained, and I floated in the dark, contemplating the irony. The Imperium called the Tyranids monsters for consuming humans. But at least the Tyranids were efficient about it. The acid reached my spine during day 70. I felt it as disconnection, not pain, but absence. Sensation vanishing in waves as nerve bundles dissolved. First, my lower body went completely numb. Whatever residual feeling had remained simply ceasing. Then the numbness crept upward, lower back, middle back, between my shoulder blades. The paralysis was total now. I couldn't move anything except my face, and even that was becoming difficult as facial nerves began to fail. I was a head. Just a head, really. A skull containing a swollen, acid-damaged brain, maintained by armor systems that refused to let me stop existing even as my body was consumed around me. Then, I transmitted, I need you to describe something for me. What, Sergeant? Colors, I said. I can't remember colors. The helmet display is all readouts and text, white letters on black background. I can't remember what red looks like, or blue, or green. Tell me about colors. Ven was quiet for a moment. Then, red is the color of blood, of anger, of warning lights in the command deck. It's warm, aggressive. Blue, I prompted. Blue is cold. It's the color of deep water, or ice, or the plasma glow from weapon coils before they fire. It's distance, melancholy. It's rare in the Imperium, Sergeant. You see it sometimes on agricultural worlds, but mostly it's a color from ancient records. Terra had green before the oceans died. I tried to visualize what he described. Couldn't. The colors wouldn't form in my damaged brain. I knew the words, red, blue, green, but the actual sensory experience of color had been eaten away along with the neural architecture that processed it. What about gold? I asked. Gold is the Emperor's color, Ven said. The armor of the Adeptus Custodes, the throne itself. It's supposed to represent divinity, permanence, glory eternal. It represents a lie, I said. But thank you for trying. The loss of color bothered me more than I'd expected. It was one more thing taken, one more proof that I was being reduced, erased, unmade. Soon there would be nothing left but basic functions. Consciousness without sensory input, thought without experience. A ghost haunting a machine. This is day 77. 11 weeks since I fell into the digestion pool. 77 days of acid eating through armor, skin, muscle, organs, bone. 77 days of watching myself cease to exist while my consciousness persisted, trapped in ceramite and maintained by life support systems that will not fail. I don't have a body anymore. Let me be precise about that, because precision is all I have left. I possess a skull. Inside the skull is a brain, swollen, damaged, but functional. The brain connects to a partial spine, maybe 20 centimeters of neural tissue before the acid dissolved the rest. That's it. That's all of me that remains physical. Everything else is gone. My arms, dissolved to the humerus, and those bones pitted and fragile. My legs, consumed entirely below the pelvis. My torso, an empty cavity. The armor's internal cameras show nothing but pooled acid where my organs used to be. My heart, lungs, liver, intestines, all of it gone, functions replaced by mechanical systems built into the armor. I am a consciousness piloting a machine. Or perhaps I'm a machine running consciousness as its primary function. The boundary has become meaningless. The armor's power cells will last another 18 months, according to current consumption rates. After that, I suppose I'll finally die. Not from biological failure, but from running out of electricity. 18 months. 600 more days of this. I've tried to stop thinking, tried to shut down, to sleep permanently, to will myself into oblivion. Doesn't work. Consciousness persists whether I want it or not, an emergent property of neural tissue that won't surrender as long as oxygen and glucose are present. The armor provides both, and will continue to provide both, forever and ever, until the power runs dry. Then, I transmitted during hour 1848. "Are you there?" "I'm here, Sergeant." His voice was tired. He'd been on Vox duty for 77 days straight, listening to my degradation, bearing witness to slow horror. They'd tried to rotate other personnel onto the channel, but I'd screamed at them until they left. Ven was my anchor, the only voice I trusted, the only person who knew the complete story. "I want to tell you something," I said. "Something I figured out in 11 weeks of floating in acid and thinking about what the Imperium actually is. I'm listening. We know this. I've said it before. But I've been thinking about what he actually does, what function the Imperial cult serves, and I think I understand now." I paused, organizing thoughts that were becoming increasingly non-linear as my brain deteriorated. "The Imperium is a machine for producing suffering," I continued. "Not intentionally. There's no malice, no grand plan, just a system that perpetuates itself by consuming human lives and converting them into resources. The religious component, the faith, the prayers, the promises of protection, that's the lubricant that keeps the machine running. If people understood what they actually are, components being processed, they'd rebel. So the Imperium tells them lies, pretty lies about purpose and glory and divine favor." "And the Emperor?" Ven asked quietly. "Is the mask the machine wears?" I said. "A false face to make the grinding of gears look like divine providence. The Chaos Gods are at least honest. They're predators wearing predator faces. The Emperor is a predator wearing a protector's mask, and somehow that's worse because it makes the victims complicit in their own consumption." Ven hesitated. "That's the most heretical thing you've said yet, Sergeant." "I know," I said, "but I'm past caring about heresy. What can the Imperium do to me that's worse than this? Execute me. I'm begging for execution. Torture me. I've been tortured for 11 weeks. Take my life? My life was taken the moment I fell into this pool, and the Imperium's machinery won't even let me finish dying. Then, for what it's worth, Sergeant, I think you might be right. I've been listening to you dissolve for 77 days while the officers told me the Emperor protects. If he protects, he has a strange way of showing it. Remember that," I said. "Remember this conversation when they send you somewhere to die for Imperial glory. Remember that the protection is a lie, the glory is propaganda, and the machine will consume you just as efficiently as it consumed me." "I'll remember," Ven said. "They came for my armor on day 77, hour 1850. I heard them first, cutting equipment, plasma torches, the sound of ceramite being breached from outside the bioship. The Tyranid vessel had finally died, killed by sustained bombardment after the High Fleet element it had been signaling never arrived. The righteous vengeance had moved in for salvage operations. "Then," I transmitted, "they're cutting through. They're coming." "I know," Ven said. "Captain Theron ordered recovery operations 6 hours ago. They're bringing your armor back to the ship, Sergeant." "No," I said, panic rising in my damaged brain. "No." He promised. Theron promised to destroy it, to not let me become a servitor. You heard him promise. Sergeant, don't let them take me back. My voice was rising, distorting, breaking into electronic screeches. Don't let them open this armor. There's nothing human left inside. Just destroy it, melt a charge, plasma, anything. Heard voices, recovery teams coordinating, tech adepts analyzing the bioship structure, officers directing salvage operations. I screamed. I screamed for 17 continuous minutes until my vocal cords, mechanically vibrated, no longer supplied by breath, began to fail. The scream transmitted across the Vox channel, and I hoped everyone heard it. I hoped they understood what they were recovering. Not a soldier, not even a corpse. Just a consciousness trapped in metal, begging for mercy that would never come. The cutting stopped. I heard voices just outside my armor, muffled, discussing the best way to extract me. Someone suggested cracking the helmet seal. Someone else argued about contamination risk. If anyone can hear me, I transmitted one final time. Don't open this armor. There's nothing inside worth saving. Just destroy it. Please, I'm begging you. Show mercy. Just this once, let the Imperium show mercy instead of efficiency. The Vox crackled. Theron's voice came through, tight with something that might have been guilt. Sergeant Kane, I'm sorry. Command wants the armor recovered for analysis. The data your systems recorded, the exposure to Tyranid digestive enzymes, the life support performance under extreme conditions. It's valuable. We have to bring you back. I'm not coming back, I said. I never left. This pool is my eternity, Captain. The armor is just a coffin that won't let me decay. Recovery team reports they're ready for extraction, Theron said, ignoring my words. Sergeant Mikhail Kane, you've served the Imperium with distinction. Your sacrifice will be remembered. You will be given full honors. The Emperor protects. The Emperor protects nothing, I whispered. Then I felt hands on my armor. Recovery teams grabbing purchase points, hydraulic lifts engaging, the slow pull as they extracted me from the pool that had been my home for 11 weeks. I emerged into air for the first time in 77 days. The acid drained off my armor in thick streams, pooling on the bioship's deck. Through my armor's external sensors, I could see the recovery team. 16 men in hazard suits, tech priests with analysis equipment, Medicaid personnel standing ready. One of the tech priests ran a scanner across my helmet. I watched his reaction, the horror quickly suppressed as his instruments showed him what was inside the armor. Machine spirit preserve us, he whispered in binary cant. There's almost nothing left. Is he alive? One of the officers asked. The tech priest checked his readouts. Consciousness is present. Brain function detected. Life support systems maintaining minimal biology. But I would not classify this as alive, Commander. This is something else. Transport him to the Medicaid bay, the officer ordered. See what can be salvaged. Salvaged. That was the word they used. Not saved. Not rescued. Salvaged. Like I was a piece of damaged equipment that might be repaired, or at minimum stripped for useful components. They carried me through the bioship's dying corridors, and I saw through my armor's cameras the extent of the damage. The vessel was a corpse. Organs necrotizing, passages collapsing, the vast alien intelligence that had piloted it gone into whatever passed for death among the Tyranids. We'd killed it. Humanity had won this tiny engagement in an eternal war. The cost was 14 dead soldiers, 23 wounded, and me, a consciousness trapped in ceramite, being carried back to the Imperium to be studied, analyzed, and eventually converted into something useful. Because the Imperium wasted nothing, not even suffering. They put my armor in a Medicaid bay and tried to open it. I listened through my external sensors as tech priests debated the best approach. The seals had fused. 11 weeks of acid exposure had corroded the release mechanisms beyond function. They'd have to cut the arm off. Wait, one of the tech priests said. The consciousness inside, it's still responsive. Perhaps we should consult with it before proceeding. A voice activated my Vox channel. Sergeant Kane. This is Medicae Captain Halen. Can you hear me? Yes, I said. We're going to remove you from the armor. The process may be uncomfortable, but there's nothing to remove, I interrupted. Did the tech priests explain? There's no body left, just neural tissue and life support systems. If you open the armor, you'll expose what's left to contamination. Better to seal it permanently and let me finish dying. Silence. Then, our duty is to preserve life, Sergeant. We'll transfer your remains to medical containment and assess options for what? I asked. Servitor conversion? That's what this is, isn't it? I'm damaged beyond repair but still functional. The Imperium's standard solution is lobotomization and repurposing. Spare me the pretense about medical assessment. More silence. I'd guessed correctly, Sergeant Kane, Halen said carefully. Your experience represents valuable data. The Mechanicus has expressed interest in studying long-term life support interaction with minimal biological substrate. You could contribute to research that might save future lives. By letting you turn me into a research specimen, I said. Consciousness in a jar, studied until you've extracted all useful data, then discarded. Or converted into something useful, a servitor perhaps. Something that serves despite being dead in all ways that matter. You're not dead, Halen said. You're injured. Severely compromised, yes, but alive. I laughed. The sound was hideous through my vocoder. Mechanical, broken, inhuman. I died on day 1, I said. Everything since has been extended necromancy. You're not preserving life, Captain. You're preventing death, which isn't the same thing. But proceed. Do what you will. I can't stop you. I don't even have hands anymore to resist. They began cutting. The plasma torch, carefully controlled, minimum power, traced a line along my armor's torso seal. I felt the heat through failing senses. Felt the armor separate, exposing the cavity within to air for the first time in 11 weeks. I heard someone vomit. Emperor's mercy, someone whispered. Through my remaining external senses, I saw what they saw, an empty shell. Armor that should have contained a human body instead held only pooled acid, dissolved biomass, and floating in the center, suspended by medical tubes and life support connections, a skull. Just a skull, some attached spine, and the machinery keeping it functional. The cerebral tissue is intact, one of the tech priests said, scanning my remains. Swollen, damaged, but functional. Remarkable that consciousness persisted through this degree of physical dissolution. Unfortunate, you mean, I corrected. Consciousness is the worst part. I'm aware of what I've become. Every moment, every change. Death would have been mercy. This is torture with a medical justification. They extracted me from the armor, carefully, precisely, maintaining the life support connections. I was transferred to a containment vessel, a transparent cylinder filled with medical suspension fluid. Tubes connected my skull to filtration systems, oxygenators, nutrient supplies. I could see now, actual vision through my own eyes, not filtered through helmet displays. The Medicae bay was white, sterile, filled with equipment I didn't recognize. Personnel moved around my containment vessel, taking readings, making notes, discussing my condition in technical terms that reduced me to data points. Then was there, standing in the corner, face pale, staring at what I'd become. "Hello, Corporal," I transmitted through the containment vessel's Vox system. Surprised? I then started, then stopped. "Sergeant, I'm so sorry. I didn't know, didn't understand. When you described it, I thought..." He couldn't finish. "You thought there'd be more left," I said. "Everyone does. The human brain is excellent at filling in missing details. You heard me talking, so you imagined a person. The reality is more efficient, just the components necessary for consciousness, everything else discarded as surplus." "What will they do to you?" Ven asked. I looked at the tech priests conferring with Medicaid personnel, at the senior officers watching from the observation deck, at the Mechanicus representatives already discussing data extraction protocols. They'll study me, I said, document how long consciousness can be maintained with minimal biological substrate, test the limits of life support integration, extract anything useful. Then, when I've served that purpose, they'll either let me die or convert what's left into something that continues serving. A servitor, maybe, or a shipboard cogitator, wetware running computational processes for eternity. That's monstrous, Venn said. That's efficiency, I corrected. The Imperium doesn't waste resources, Corporal. Not metal, not fuel, not human remains. Everything gets repurposed until there's nothing left to extract. I told you, the Imperium and the Tyranids operate on the same principle. We just pretend it's noble when we do it. A tech priest approached Venn. Corporal, you're scheduled for debriefing. This area is restricted to essential personnel. Venn looked at me one last time. I'll remember, Sergeant. Everything you told me. I swear it. Good, I said. That's all I ask. He left, the doors sealed behind him. I was alone with the medical staff, the tech priests, the officers observing from safety. Alone with my new eternity. They kept me conscious. That was the cruelest part. They could have sedated me, could have induced medical coma, could have done anything to spare me the awareness of my condition. Instead, they kept me conscious, because conscious subjects provided better data. I floated in my containment vessel and watched the Medicaid bay through the transparent walls, watched shifts change, watched personnel come and go, watched the Mechanicus representatives take their endless measurements and readings. On day 90, a Magos came to observe me personally. He was ancient, more machine than flesh, his original biology reduced to a brain in an armored case much like my containment vessel, except his was ornate, decorative. He'd chosen this existence. I'd had it forced upon me. Fascinating, the Magos said, his voice emanating from a Vox unit. Consciousness preserved despite catastrophic biological failure. You represent a unique data point, Sergeant Kane. The omniscience providence that you survived long enough for recovery. The omniscience is superstition, I said. There's no machine god. There's no spirit in technology. Just engineering and programming. You worship circuit boards and call it religion. The Magos tilted his head, a disturbingly mechanical motion. You speak heresy, but your experience proves the opposite. Your armor maintained your life through 11 weeks of exposure that should have killed you. Is that not divine providence? That's manufacturing specifications, I countered. Tech adepts designed redundant systems to keep soldiers fighting through catastrophic damage. They succeeded. The armor worked exactly as programmed, no divinity required. And yet you persist, the Magos said, against all probability, against all biological limits. Consciousness maintained long past the point where neural tissue should have ceased function. The machine spirits within your armor cooperated to preserve you. The automated systems functioned correctly, I said. That's not cooperation. That's logic gates. If biosign detected, then maintain life support. Basic programming interpreted as divine will by people who've forgotten how machines actually work. The Magos was silent for a long moment. Then, you are bitter, Sergeant. Understandably so. But consider, would a consciousness this persistent, this resilient, not be valuable? Would the Omnissiah not wish to preserve such data for study? And there it was. The justification. I was valuable, not as a person. I'd stopped being a person 11 weeks ago, but as data, as a research subject, as a consciousness that had survived long enough to teach the Mechanicus something about the limits of biological sustainability. How long? I asked. How long will you keep me like this? Indefinitely, the Magos said. Your containment vessel's systems can be maintained eternally. Consciousness provides insight. Your experience, your sensations, your psychological state under these conditions, all valuable information. I said. You are a subject of study that advances the Omnissiah's knowledge, the Magos corrected. Is that not more purposeful than death? No, I said. It's not. Death has dignity. This is torture disguised as science. The Magos made a sound that might have been a sigh through his mechanical vocoder. Sergeant Kane, you will remain in containment for observation. All data regarding your condition will be recorded. When your consciousness finally ceases through natural degradation or power failure, you will be given full honors. Until then, you serve. I've served enough, I said. Nevertheless, the Magos replied. Then he left, his heavy mechanical footsteps echoing through the Medici Bay. I floated in my cylinder and understood. This was my eternity. Not 11 weeks, not 18 months. Forever, or until my brain tissue finally deteriorated past the point where consciousness could be maintained. Years, decades, potentially centuries if they kept upgrading my containment systems. The Tyranid digestion pool had been the beginning. This was the real horror. Not dissolution, but preservation. Not death, but endless unlife maintained for the convenience of research protocols. The Imperium had saved me, and in saving me, had damned me to something infinitely worse than the pool. I don't know what day it is anymore. The chronometer in my containment vessel doesn't display, or I've lost the ability to interpret the numbers. Time has become fluid, meaningless. Days blend into weeks, blend into months, blend into an eternal present tense where nothing changes except the personnel who observe me. I've seen Ven 3 times, or maybe 30. Hard to tell. He comes to the observation deck, stands at the window, looks at what I've become. We don't speak anymore. What would we say? I've learned something about consciousness. It's not binary. You don't have it or lack it. Instead, it's a spectrum, and you can slide down that spectrum without fully ceasing. I'm sliding. My thoughts are less linear now, more associative. I'll start thinking about the pool and find myself remembering my father, and then contemplating the nature of acid, and then reciting imperial propaganda, and then forgetting what I was thinking about in the first place. The brain damage is progressive, the swelling never fully resolved. The tissue continues to deteriorate, slowly, gradually, but irreversibly. Eventually, I'll slide all the way down the consciousness spectrum into oblivion. The Mechanicus is documenting the process. Every day, week, month, they take scans, run tests, measure the degradation, watching consciousness dissolve in real time. Valuable data. I am a teaching tool. A living, no, existing, example of biological limits. Students observe me, tech priests study me. Medical researchers reference my case in their analyses. I am Sergeant Mikhail Kane, age unknown, origin forgotten, identity reduced to containment subject Kappa 7, consciousness maintained via artificial life support for extended duration. That's what the label on my cylinder says. I've stared at it long enough to memorize every letter. Sometimes I try to scream. My skull has no vocal cords. So the scream remains internal, just neurons firing in distress patterns that the monitoring equipment records as elevated stress responses. They give me sedatives when the stress readings get too high. Not enough to render me unconscious, just enough to flatten the peaks. Can't have me damaging myself through psychological distress before they've extracted all useful data. The Vox channel to Ven is still open. I don't know if he's listening anymore. Don't know if anyone is. But I transmit anyway, because transmission is the only action I can still perform. Ven, I say into the void. Corporal Ven, are you there? Silence. I want to tell you what I've learned, in case anyone is listening. In case my data serves any purpose beyond research protocols. Silence. The Emperor doesn't protect. We knew this. But I've learned a corollary. The Emperor doesn't release. The Imperium never lets you go. It will extract utility from you until there's nothing left, and then it will extract utility from your remains, and then it will extract utility from the data about your remains. You never stop serving. Death isn't escape. It's just a change in function. Silence. The Chaos Gods promise power and deliver slavery. The Emperor promises protection and delivers consumption. The Tyranids promise nothing, and at least are honest about it. In the end, we're all just biomass. Resources to be processed by systems that don't care whether we suffer during the processing. Silence. I've been thinking about the pool, the digestion pool. I thought that was horror, 11 weeks dissolving in acid. But that was mercy compared to this. The pool would have finished eventually, would have reduced me to nothing. This preservation is worse. The Tyranids wanted my biomass. The Imperium wants my consciousness. Both are consumption, but at least the Tyranids would have let me end. Silence. My name was Mikhail Kaine, 34 years old, born on Hiveworld Tertius, Manufacturum 773. My father was an overseer. I wanted to see the stars. I fell into a Tyranid digestion pool and spent 11 weeks learning that faith is lies, and protection is propaganda, and the Imperium grinds its servants just as efficiently as any Xenos threat. Silence. I don't know how long I've been in containment. Months. Years. Time is difficult. But I know this. I'm still conscious, still aware, still experiencing every moment of this existence. The armor protected me from the acid. The containment vessel protects me from death. Both are prisons. Both are eternal. Silence. If anyone hears this, if anyone remembers, know that I tried to die, tried to stop, tried to surrender. But the Imperium wouldn't let me. They needed the data. Needed to document how long consciousness could persist under these conditions. The answer, if you're curious, is longer than you can imagine, longer than sanity can tolerate, longer than any human was meant to endure. Silence. The Emperor protects, they told us. They lied. The Emperor preserves you in whatever state is useful, preserves your service past the point of death, preserves your consciousness to extract the last drops of utility from your suffering. Silence. My name was Mikhail Kaine. I was human once. I fell into a pool. I haven't stopped falling. Silence. This transmission will repeat. The containment vessel's systems are programmed to broadcast on this channel indefinitely. Even after my consciousness finally fails, even after the last neuron stops firing, this message will continue. A ghost in the machine, a warning no one will heed. Silence. The Emperor protects nothing. Remember that. When they send you to die for Imperial glory, remember Sergeant Kane who fell into a Tyranid digestion pool and learned that the Imperium's promises are lies, and its mercy is torture, and its service is eternal. Silence. I'm still falling. I'll always be falling. That's my eternity, falling through acid that never finishes consuming me, falling through preservation that never releases me, falling through an existence that is neither life nor death, but something worse. Consciousness maintained past the point where consciousness serves any purpose except suffering. Silence. My name was The Transmission Loops. Begins again. Will continue beginning again, forever, as long as the power systems function. In the Medicae Bay, in the containment vessel, Sergeant Mikhail Kaine's consciousness flickers through damaged neural tissue. Still present, still aware, still experiencing the eternal moment of dissolution that never completes. The tech priests take their measurements. The medical staff monitor their readouts. The Mechanicus researchers add data to their archives. And in the cylinder, a skull floats in suspension fluid, eyes that can no longer close, staring at nothing. Brain tissue slowly degrading while life support systems refuse to let the process finish. Falling. Always falling, forever falling, into a pool that has no bottom, through acid that never stops eating, toward a death that never arrives. The Emperor protects, they claimed. They lied. Aboard the Righteous Vengeance, Corporal Venn stands before a new squad of recruits. He's sergeant now, promoted after 3 years of service, decorated for actions on 7 battlefields. recognized for valor and leadership. The recruits are young, eager, faithful. The Emperor protects, one of them says, making the sign of the Aquila across his chest. Then pauses, opens his mouth to correct them, closes it again. Instead, he says, "Get your armor seals checked. Triple check them. If you fall in hostile environment, you want those seals to fail quickly. Understand?" "Don't we want the seals to hold?" "No," Ven says quietly. "Trust me, you don't." He walks away, leaving them puzzled. In his quarters, he keeps a data slate. On the slate is a recording 11 weeks of Vox transmissions from a digestion pool and everything that came after. He listens sometimes, when he needs to remember. When the propaganda gets too thick and he feels himself believing the lies about duty and glory and divine protection, the recording reminds him, the Imperium consumes its servants. Efficiently, eternally, without mercy, the Emperor protects nothing. And somewhere in the depths of the righteous vengeance, in a Medicae bay sealed from general personnel, a containment vessel hums with maintained power. Inside, consciousness flickers, persists, suffers, will suffer forever. My name was Mikhail Caney. I fell into a Tyranid digestion pool for 11 weeks. I've been falling ever since. This is my eternity.